The morning air smelled of burnt toast and gasoline, a combination that somehow captured my life at that moment. I stood in our narrow driveway, my hands trembling against the cool metal of the garage door, staring at an empty space where my car should have been. My dream car, sleek, cherry red, a 2-year-old sports coupe I'd saved every dime to buy, the one I had imagined driving across the coast on summer nights, was gone. Not borrowed, not being fixed, just gone. My name is Caden. I was 24 then, and I had just returned from my first real job interview out of college, full of hope and exhaustion. My family lived in a modest suburban house on the edge of town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's business. My parents, Evelyn and Marcus, always had high expectations for my sister, Lana. Lana, 2 years younger, with her effortless charm and grades that seemed to glide through the system, was their golden child. I knew it then, in a quiet, gnawing way, but nothing had prepared me for this. "Mom!" I called out, my voice tight, echoing against the walls of the house. The living room was empty, except for the faint smell of cinnamon from breakfast she must have made hours ago. "Dad!" Footsteps approached. Marcus appeared at the doorway, his hands in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. He was always a man of gestures more than words, the kind of father who said he loved you but showed it in small, calculated doses. Evelyn followed, her smile too bright, too rehearsed. "Caden," she said softly, "we need to talk." My stomach sank. I didn't want to talk. I wanted my car, the one thing I had built on my own, the one symbol of independence, ripped away in a blink. We sold your car," Marcus said, voice low, like he was trying not to wake someone sleeping. "For Lana. She really needed it, Caden." I froze. My mind refused to process the words. "Needed it?" I asked, my voice sharp, trembling. "She doesn't even have a license yet. She's been borrowing my old beat-up Honda. Why my car?" "It was the only way." Evelyn started, then stopped, unsure. She never had to explain before. Their decisions were never questioned. I wanted to scream, but something in me snapped into silence instead. I sank onto the front steps, the morning sun burning my neck, my chest tight. My dream, my hard work, my freedom, they'd sold it. For my sister, for her. And when I looked up at them, I saw no shame, only expectation. Expectation that I would understand, that I would forgive, that I would move on. I didn't understand. I couldn't forgive, and I wouldn't move on. I felt anger coil in my stomach, heavy and relentless. But beneath it was something sharper, colder, betrayal. They had chosen her over me, and the realization was like a slow poison. Every smile, every family dinner, every shared laugh suddenly carried a hidden weight. My parents' love felt transactional. My sister's triumph at my expense a silent dagger. I clenched my fists, feeling the adrenaline surge. I needed answers. Why now? Why my car? And more importantly, why had no one warned me? I didn't notice when Lana appeared, her presence quiet but deliberate. She leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, a sly smile curling her lips. "Hey, Cade," she said. Her nickname, a childhood habit, now sounded like mockery. "Nice car, by the way. Guess you'll be walking now." I stared at her, disbelief and fury tangled in a single, burning thread. "You knew," I hissed. "You knew they were selling it for you?" She shrugged, unbothered, like this was all ordinary. "I didn't make them do it. But you know how they are. They want me to succeed. You should understand that by now." I wanted to rip her mouth open and scream the words I'd been holding for years. "It's always you, isn't it? Always Lana." Instead, I walked past her, ignoring her smirk, my mind spinning. That smirk, so calm, so assured, was the first breadcrumb of suspicion I didn't know I would follow for months. Something was off. Something bigger than a car, bigger than my parents, bigger than Lana. And I would find it. But at that moment, I didn't know how. All I knew was that the air felt heavier than it should, that the house smelled different, almost wrong. And as I reached the corner of the street, I saw a shadow slip into the driveway where my car had been. Not Lana, not my parents, someone else. Someone watching. I froze, heart pounding. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about a car. This was about them, my family, and a secret I wasn't supposed to uncover. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Nothing would ever be the same again. And then, just as I took a cautious step forward, the shadow moved, vanishing into the morning fog like it had never been there at all. The weeks after that morning felt unreal, like I was walking through someone else's life. I kept expecting my parents to apologize, to explain, to make it right, but they never did. Breakfasts were quiet, dinner conversations stiff and rehearsed, Lana's laughter echoing through the house like a reminder that she had one. And the car. Every time I passed a red sports coupe on the street, I felt that hollow ache all over again, the stolen freedom gnawing at me. I tried to keep myself busy, long hours at the office, running errands, catching up with friends, but nothing distracted me from the sense that something fundamental had shifted. My parents weren't just unfair. They had made a deliberate choice to hurt me. And Lana, she wore it all like armor. I needed to understand how it had happened. One rainy evening, I found myself in the attic, a place I hadn't entered in years. Dust coated every surface, forgotten boxes stacked like time capsules of my childhood. I had been looking for old photos, maybe some comfort and memory, but instead, I stumbled on a box of papers I didn't recognize. Financial statements, receipts, even some letters addressed to my parents from a car dealership. I picked up one of the letters, feeling the paper tremble in my fingers. It was from the dealership, confirming the sale of my car, but the amount listed didn't match what I remembered paying. There was an extra fee, a strange arrangement for someone named L. Matthews, which I knew instantly was Lana. My heart raced. I didn't understand why this minor detail made me feel so exposed. But it did. It wasn't just the money. It was the secrecy. My parents had never explained anything, never included me in their decisions, never told me the truth. And that letter, that proof, small as it was, made it all concrete. This wasn't an accident. They had planned it. I spent hours sifting through the attic, uncovering more. Notes on scholarship opportunities for Lana, saved up emergency funds they never mentioned to me. Little things that painted a picture I had only sensed before. My parents had favored her in ways I hadn't fully realized until now. Small decisions that built up over years. They had justified it in their minds as helping the golden child succeed. But to me, it felt like they had built an entire life around sidelining me. I remembered that first day I had confronted them, Marcus saying, "It was the only way." And now, looking at the receipts and the letters, I understood that it hadn't been about need. It had been about choice. My parents had chosen her over me, repeatedly, and they had done it in silence, expecting me to accept it. The discovery unsettled me, but it also sparked something else, clarity. For the first time, I felt the fire that would eventually drive me to act. I wasn't just hurt. I was awake. I wasn't going to be a passive participant in my own life anymore. That night, I stayed awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, piecing together the subtle betrayals I had ignored for years. Every birthday Lana's achievements had been celebrated more than mine. Every dinner, every conversation, every small victory of mine. Diminished, minimized, unrecognized. I realized I had been trained to accept it, conditioned to internalize the hierarchy they had built in our home. And then, as if the universe had decided to cement the lesson, I received a text from Lana the next morning. It was simple, innocuous even, but the words hit me like a slap. "Thanks for letting me have it, Cade. Really appreciate it. Love, Lana." I read it over and over. Letting me have it. My car. My choice. My life. Everything framed as if I had willingly given it away. Rage bubbled beneath my skin. A slow, suffocating heat. That text was the breadcrumb I needed. The first overt proof that Lana not only participated in the betrayal but reveled in it, passive-aggressive and unrepentant. I clenched my phone and felt my jaw tighten. I realized then that I couldn't confront her yet. Not directly. Not until I understood the full scope of what I was up against. There was more to uncover, more to see, more to expose. And I would. In the days that followed, I started observing, listening, noting patterns. Lana's small victories, the way my parents smiled at her, the emails and calls I intercepted by accident. They all built a trail, breadcrumb by breadcrumb. It was almost cinematic in its precision. Betrayal hidden in plain sight, a narrative crafted to make me doubt myself, to make me feel small. And yet, the deeper I looked, the more I realized the truth. This wasn't just about a car. It was never just about a car. It was about control, about legacy, about who they wanted me to be and who they wanted Lana to become. It was about their perception of value, and I had been marked as less valuable from the start. I remember sitting in my old room one evening, the rain streaking down the window like slow tears, my fingers tracing the edge of the empty space where my car keys used to hang. I made a promise to myself, to my future, that I would reclaim what was mine. Not just the car, but respect, recognition, and the satisfaction of showing them that the choices they made in secret could be turned against them. I didn't know how yet, but I felt the pulse of it, the plan forming in the back of my mind. Every betrayal leaves a trace. Every secret has a weakness, and I intended to find it. That night, I fell asleep with the letters spread across my bed, a silent declaration of war against the family I had loved blindly. But as I drifted into restless dreams, a single thought kept me awake, sharper than any fear. Someone else had been there in the driveway the day I found my car gone. I hadn't imagined it. The shadow, the watching eyes. I wasn't the only one who had noticed. And if they were involved, then whatever was coming next would be bigger than I had ever imagined. The next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling that every corner of my life was being watched, measured, tested. I started noticing things I had ignored before. Tiny inconsistencies in conversations, subtle glances that didn't belong. The way Lana's laughter sometimes seemed rehearsed, too precise, almost echoing off invisible walls. My parents had always been controlling in their own quiet ways, but now it felt amplified, orchestrated. Like every word and gesture was part of a choreography I wasn't meant to see. It started with breadcrumbs, a casual mention by Lana about a meeting at the dealership last week. Something so small it might have been innocent, but my gut told me otherwise. My mother, Evelyn, flinched when I repeated it aloud. That was the first crack, the subtle sign that maybe they were hiding more than just the sale of my car. I began paying attention, recording conversations discreetly, jotting notes in a small, inconspicuous notebook I carried everywhere. Every lie, every slip, every overconfidence became evidence I could use later. One evening, I followed Lana on what she thought was a simple errand. My heart raced as I trailed her through dimly lit streets, keeping a safe distance. She met someone, a man I had never seen before, and exchanged a small package. I couldn't hear what they said, but the tension was unmistakable. The look in her eyes a mix of fear and calculation. My pulse raced. Whoever she was meeting, this wasn't just about my car. This was bigger, and somehow, she had allies I hadn't anticipated. Back at home, I watched my parents with renewed attention. Marcus was more tense than usual, distracted by phone calls he took in private corners, murmuring words that made no sense until later. Evelyn tried to act normal, but I caught the way she carefully avoided my gaze when I brought up financial matters or my old car. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else, but I had learned to see it. The tension inside me boiled into resolve. I couldn't confront them blindly. I had to act with intelligence, with precision. But I needed proof. Something undeniable that would strip away the excuses and reveal the truth in a way that couldn't be denied. And that meant stepping carefully, like a predator circling, watching, waiting for the perfect moment. Then came the small discovery that tipped the balance. While clearing out old documents in my apartment, I found a USB drive left anonymously in my mailbox. No note, no sender, just the device. Heart hammering. I plugged it in and found it filled with scanned receipts, letters, and snippets of communication between my parents and the dealership. Even more striking, there were fragments of texts between Lana and an unknown accomplice discussing timing, money, and handling Cade. It confirmed what I had feared. The betrayal was deliberate, coordinated, and personal. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling a cold clarity settle over me. This wasn't just parental favoritism or a spontaneous decision. They had conspired, and Lana had participated willingly. My anger was sharp, precise, a blade of fury tempered by focus. But beneath it, I felt something else. Determination. I was no longer a passive victim. I would act, carefully, intelligently, and I would make them realize the consequences of their choices. Late that night, I spoke to the empty room, almost to an imagined audience. If you've ever been sidelined, underestimated, or betrayed, pay attention. Watch, learn, and prepare. And if you're following this story, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay with me, because the next moves are where everything changes. The undeniable proof arrived on a Thursday, as ordinary as any other day, but its impact was seismic. I had been monitoring my family for weeks, piecing together patterns, listening, observing, recording, and every small clue led me closer to the truth. But nothing prepared me for what I found in the mailbox that morning. An unmarked envelope, thick, almost heavy, with no return address. Inside was a single folder, neatly organized, each page a dagger to my disbelief. Receipts, contracts, bank statements, and most damning photos. Photos of my parents meeting with someone I didn't recognize at the dealership weeks before my car had been sold. Shaking hands, exchanging envelopes. There was Lana too, smiling awkwardly beside them, as if she had staged the whole scene. Every document screamed one truth. They hadn't acted out of need or fairness. They had conspired, methodically, deliberately. I sat at the kitchen table, my hands trembling, the folder spread in front of me like a battlefield map. For the first time, I felt clarity mixed with cold fury. Betrayal was no longer a feeling. It was a fact, and facts demanded action. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't call anyone. Not yet. This was mine to control. I needed to understand the full extent of their game before striking. My mind raced, calculating, replaying every interaction, every subtle dig, every smile that had once seemed benign. Every piece fell into place now, forming a pattern of manipulation I couldn't ignore. And then it hit me. Someone had wanted me to find this. Whoever sent the USB, whoever left this folder, it was deliberate. It wasn't just information. It was an invitation, a call to arms. They were nudging me, testing me, daring me to move. I spent hours cross-referencing the photos with my own observations, piecing together a timeline of deception. I realized Lana had been more than just a passive participant. She had been actively coordinating with the third party, making sure every detail reinforced her position. My parents had followed her lead, justifying each action with smiles and half-truths. It was cold, calculated, and cruel. By evening, I had made my first countermove. Not confrontation, not yet, but a strategic placement of myself within their orbit. I started subtly questioning them, asking about bank transfers, insurance claims, work schedules, things that seemed casual but were designed to unsettle them, to make them slip. And slip they did, little by little, contradictions creeping into their speech, fleeting looks of guilt, hesitation where confidence had once lived. Lana noticed too. That night, as she poured herself a glass of water in the kitchen, she glanced at me with something unreadable in her eyes. "You've been different lately," she said casually, but I caught the edge of fear beneath the words. "Stress, I guess," I replied, my tone smooth, careful. "You know how work has been." She didn't press. She couldn't. And for the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. A small, almost imperceptible tremor that told me she knew I was coming for her. Later, alone in my room, I laid out the folder again, mapping every connection, every lie, every small betrayal. I began drafting my first decisive moves, planning in quiet precision. No one would see them coming. I would be surgical, methodical, and devastatingly effective. And then the moment arrived. I received an unexpected call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. A former family friend who had drifted away but clearly remained observant. Their voice was low, almost urgent. "Caden, I think you need to see this before you make your move. It's bigger than you think." My pulse raced. I agreed immediately. The location was discreet, a small cafe downtown, neutral ground. I hung up and stared at the folder one last time, a sense of inevitability settling in. Everything I had suspected was true, but now it was time to act. Not rashly, not blindly, but decisively. As I walked out the door, the evening air crisp against my skin, I felt the weight of every choice pressing down, heavy and exhilarating. The pieces were moving, the board set, and I was finally in control of my game. But just as I reached the street, I caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow slipping behind the hedges of our neighbor's yard. A figure watching me, unseen but unmistakable. My chest tightened. Whoever they were, they had been following my every step, anticipating my moves. And now, I realized with a thrill that sent chills down my spine, the real game was about to begin. The tension in the air that Saturday morning was almost tangible. Like walking through a storm you could hear but not see. I had spent the past week meticulously planning my counterattack, tracing every breadcrumb of betrayal, lining up every move with the precision of a chess master. It wasn't about rage anymore. It was about strategy. Every glance, every word, every small action would be calculated to force the truth into the open. I started with subtle disruptions, questions in casual conversation, innocent remarks meant to unsettle. I asked my mother why she had made certain financial decisions, why certain bills were missing my signature, why Lana had suddenly been given privileges I had been denied. Each question was a scalpel, probing, pressing, and I watched the reactions carefully. Her smiles wavered, her eyes flickered. Marcus, my father, started clearing his throat more, shifting uneasily whenever Lana spoke. And Lana. She began to grow restless, her smugness giving way to subtle irritation. It was working. Then came the first public move. Our extended family had gathered for a weekend barbecue. My perfect stage. I had prepared for this moment carefully. Snippets of conversations recorded, documents copied, the faintest hints of evidence laid out in ways that wouldn't alarm anyone until the right moment. The air was thick with laughter, the smell of grilled meat, and under it all, a silent countdown to exposure. I let the conversation drift toward cars, casually mentioning the dealership, the purchase, the details of insurance. Lana laughed, offering her own version, embellishing the story as if she were rehearsing a role. "Oh, Cade, you're so dramatic. They just wanted me to have it," she said, spinning the narrative like a ribbon. I smiled faintly, nodding. "Sure," I said, "but I was just going through some paperwork, and, the numbers don't exactly add up. Funny how these things happen, isn't it?" Her smile faltered slightly, but she tried to maintain composure. My parents tensed, clearly aware that the conversation was moving in a dangerous direction. The air between us thickened, charged with unspoken truths. I let the tension build before I unveiled the first piece of undeniable proof. "I also found these," I said, sliding copies of receipts and emails across the table, my fingers brushing lightly against Lana's hand as I did. She recoiled subtly, but quickly masked it. Everyone else leaned in. The photos of the dealership meetings, the bank transactions, the letters, they spoke louder than any accusation I could have voiced. Silence fell. Lana's face went pale, my mother's eyes widened, and my father's jaw tightened as he realized the consequences of what had been unearthed. "I think it's clear now who was really making the decisions here," I said, my voice calm, deliberate. "And who benefited from them." The world seemed to pause, the backyard chatter muted, the grill smoke curling around us like a curtain. And then the storm broke. Lana stammered, trying to explain herself, her excuses tumbling over one another. My parents tried to intervene, but the pattern was too clear. I laid each fact gently but firmly, weaving the narrative until the truth couldn't be denied. But the game wasn't over. The real twist came when the figure from the shadows stepped forward. It was the same person I had glimpsed weeks ago, the one who had left the USB and the folder. My heart leapt, a mix of apprehension and anticipation. They handed me another envelope, this one containing detailed evidence of deeper manipulations. Conspiracies that went beyond my family, extending to people I had trusted, people I hadn't even suspected. The backyard barbecue became a stage of revelation, every eye fixed on the unfolding drama. My parents realized the stakes had shifted. Their silence and manipulation were no longer defensible. Lana, finally cornered, admitted her complicity, her voice trembling as the weight of exposure crushed her confidence. I felt a strange satisfaction, not in malice, but in justice. The plan had worked. My careful, patient maneuvering had forced truth into the light without me resorting to recklessness. The people who thought they were untouchable were now exposed, accountable, and the scales had begun to tip. Yet, as I looked at the faces of my family, I knew this wasn't the conclusion. The final move, the ultimate revelation, still awaited. The tension was only a precursor to the ultimate confrontation, a storm that would demand every ounce of precision, patience, and courage I had cultivated over these months. And just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the yard, I saw her, the shadowy figure from before, watching me from across the street. I knew then that this wasn't just about exposing my family anymore. Someone else had been orchestrating more than I could yet comprehend, and the final showdown would be far more dangerous than I had anticipated. The night air was sharp with anticipation as I walked toward the address the shadowy figure had given me. It was a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place that smelled of rust and old wood, the perfect stage for a confrontation that had been building for months. My pulse was steady now, each step measured, each breath controlled. I had planned for this, rehearsed every possible scenario in my mind, and yet, the weight of the moment pressed on me with undeniable gravity. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, shafts of light piercing the dusty air. And there they were, my parents, Lana, and the shadow, who now revealed themselves as someone I had trusted once. Someone who had orchestrated the deeper layer of betrayal that had been influencing my family behind the scenes. Their faces were a mix of surprise, guilt, and apprehension, each registering the realization that the truth was finally undeniable. I didn't speak at first. I let the silence stretch, thick and suffocating, giving them the space to feel the gravity of their choices. Marcus shifted, attempting his usual calm demeanor, but it faltered as his eyes met mine. Evelyn's hands trembled, and Lana's confident posture cracked, revealing the fear she had been hiding for months. "You thought you could control everything," I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. "Manipulate, hide, pretend it didn't matter who you hurt. But it did, and it always would." I placed the documents, the USBs, and the photos on a nearby table, letting them speak for themselves. Every transaction, every deceit, every secret meeting was now laid bare. The shadow stepped closer, nodding subtly, affirming the extent of the manipulation. Lana tried to interrupt, to defend herself, but I held up my hand. "No, this is about seeing the truth, about understanding the consequences of your choices. You betrayed me, and now you can't undo that. All you can do is face it." My parents' silence was deafening. I saw the cracks in their composure, the subtle signs of panic, the realization that the careful life they had curated had collapsed. And for Lana, the shock was harsher. Her carefully constructed world of privilege and manipulation had no defense here. I watched her eyes widen as the full picture became unavoidable. Then came the moment of power, the one I had been preparing for. I outlined every move I had made over the past weeks, the observations, the recordings, the cross-referencing of their lies. I explained how I had anticipated their reactions, how I had set the stage for their own confessions, and how each step had been deliberate. It wasn't just revenge. It was justice, precise and undeniable. By the end, the room was heavy with the weight of truth. My parents' shoulders slumped, the bravado gone, and Lana sat frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a trapped bird. The shadow, satisfied, gave me a subtle nod, confirming that my reckoning was complete. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it had all been channeled into something tangible, something that finally restored balance. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I simply let the evidence and my presence speak louder than any words could. And then, as the warehouse grew quiet, I stepped back, letting them absorb the full impact of their actions. My victory wasn't about humiliation. It was about reclaiming myself, reclaiming my dignity, and proving that their choices didn't define me. The catharsis was subtle but profound, a quiet satisfaction that came from knowing I had won without stooping to cruelty. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe, to feel the weight of months lift, replaced with a calm sense of purpose. I glanced at the shadow one last time. "Thank you," I said softly, "for showing me the path." They nodded, and without another word, disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with the remnants of the confrontation. The silence that followed was almost meditative, a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded it. I walked out of the warehouse, the night air cool against my skin, carrying with me the knowledge that I had faced the storm and emerged intact. But even in victory, I knew life would be different now. My family had been exposed, the dynamics forever altered, and the scars, though no longer sharp with anger, would remain as reminders of what had been lost and what had been reclaimed. And as I drove home in the quiet of the night, the city lights stretching endlessly before me, I realized the most important lesson of all. Betrayal can cut deep, but the strength to rise above it defines who we truly are. The days that followed were quiet, almost painfully so. The tension that had gripped the house, the whispers, the subtle games, all dissolved into a fragile, uneasy calm. My parents avoided my gaze. Lana moved through the house with a hollowed confidence, and I found myself walking through the rooms with a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. Victory had been achieved, but it was quieter than I had imagined, and far more introspective. I spent the mornings alone, sometimes sitting on the front porch with a cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up without the weight of expectation pressing on my chest. The city hummed around me, indifferent, yet I felt profoundly connected to the rhythm of life moving forward. I thought about the months of betrayal, the calculated manipulations, and the shadowy figure who had nudged me into understanding the full scope of it all. They were gone now, their presence lingering only as a whisper in memory, but the lessons they had forced me to learn would remain. Lana approached me one afternoon, tentative, her usual confidence tempered by the knowledge that her victories had been hollow. "Cade," she began softly, I understand if you hate me." I studied her for a long moment. Hate was too heavy a word, too absolute. I felt something more nuanced, acknowledgement, accountability, and a quiet distance that now existed between us. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "I just understand you better." and I understand myself better too. But things have changed, Lana. Everything has changed. She nodded, swallowing something unsaid. The shift was subtle but profound. She would have to rebuild, and I had already begun the process of reclaiming my life. The balance had been restored, not through vengeance for vengeance's sake, but through clarity, through action, and through the unwavering decision to no longer be sidelined. I took time to reflect on what had happened. The betrayal, the observation, the countermeasures, they had been painful, yes, but they had also forged resilience. I had learned patience, strategy, and the value of truth. I had discovered that revenge wasn't always about public humiliation. Sometimes, it was about reclaiming control over your own story, writing the narrative in your own voice, and proving to yourself that your existence mattered. And as I sat alone one evening, the city lights shimmering through my apartment window, I spoke to the quiet audience I imagined. Life can turn on a single choice, a single act of betrayal. But even in the darkest moments, you can reclaim yourself. You can rise. You can see the truth and act on it. If you've ever been wronged, don't let the weight crush you. Learn, observe, and move with purpose. I paused, letting the words sink into the silence. The memory of my lost dream car and the years of subtle favoritism crystallizing into understanding. If you've been following this story, I added, voice steady but carrying that quiet intensity. Make sure you like, subscribe, and stay with me for more stories that prove sometimes the quietest victories are the most satisfying. I thought about growth, about the roots of betrayal and the seeds of recovery, about how the silence after the storm carries lessons heavier than any scream could. My family had been forced to confront themselves, and I had confronted myself in the process. Healing, I realized, wasn't loud. It was deliberate, patient, and deeply personal. And as I leaned back, closing my eyes, I whispered into the night, a final reflection that lingered like a ghost. We are all trees, some of us bent by wind, some of us broken by lightning, but the roots remember, the roots hold, and with time, even the deepest scars can nourish growth. The story was over, but the echo remained. A quiet reminder that betrayal could never truly silence those who had learned to listen to their own strength.